Yeah. So I'll give a basic explanation. So basically, you are given a sequence of rotations, something like this. And we have a cursor which starts at this position, and then it can go up to here, either this position or this position. And these instructions tell us how to change the cursor position. So there's a there are 4 types of instructions. The first is C, so rotate the cursor clockwise. So if the cursor is in this position, it will become this. And then there's A, which means anti-clockwise. So if the cursor is this, it becomes this. Or if the cursor is this, it becomes this. Basically the opposite of C. And then there's flip. So this becomes this. So 2 turns, this becomes this, and vice versa. And then there's no change. So basically print the same cursor again. So for example, if we take the instruction C2, A3, N1, so we are starting it in this position, then we are turning it once clockwise, twice, then we are turning it thrice anti-clockwise, and then we are staying in the same position for once. So what we have to do is we have to implement a program to print this sequence when you give it a list of instructions like this. So first we have to think about like, okay, since like this is a like pretty simple problem, I won't go into specifics, but like when you read the problem, like by going like reading through the problem, we can see that there are 2 things we have to do. First is to break this down to a set of instructions that are like easy to process by a computer or a program, and then actually prepare the string that we have to output. So let's start. So I'm going to use Python. I'm still a bit trusty on Python because like it's not what I use most of the time, but let's see how it goes. So I'm going to start with the function which does this. So I'm going to name it process instructions, and I'm going to take as input a string. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to keep a variable called output, and then at the end return that, so we don't have to worry about printing or anything else. And so I'm going to call this function process instructions and give it an input. So I'll take the same thing from the example, this, and I'm going to print what we are getting from this. Okay, so far I think everyone is with me. Okay, now I explained like there are 2 parts in the problem. One is like passing the input or like breaking it down to instructions, then preparing the output. So to break it down to instructions, obviously we have to iterate through the input. So before that, to make things easier, I'm going to define the possible values for our cursor. So it starts here, then it goes to this state, and then it comes here, and finally we have this state. I have to escape the character because like it is considered as a special character in Python. Okay, and also one other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to define the set of instructions. Okay, so we have the instruction C, which means go one further. And then we have the instruction A, which means go back once. Then we have the instruction F, which means go front twice. And then we have the instruction N, which means do nothing. Okay. So now I have to iterate through the string. So I'm going to iterate through the string for each character in input. Now I have to figure out what to do. Okay. So first we have to figure out whether the current character is an instruction or it's a digit showing us the like number of times we have to execute that instruction. So we can simply do if C in instructions. That the else block as it. So this means it is instruction. This means it is not. So we have to iterate. So I'll modify this a bit. So if it's here, it means it's an instruction. And so it will go inside this if block. And if it's here, it will go to the else block. So I'll complete the else block first. So we have to figure out how many times we have to execute this. So I'm going to keep a variable with something like count. Sorry. And now I have to pass the string and get the value to count. So I can do something simple like this, count equals int C, but then comes the problem if we have numbers with multiple digits. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply the existing value of count by 10, because if you are starting from the left and going through, so if you get 1 first, it will be 1 in here, and in the next iteration it will be 1, but we want it to be 10 plus add the number in this position. So I'm going to make it like this. So now we have the count figured out. Okay, now we have to figure out how to get the instruction. So what I'm going to do is, okay, now I can get the instruction like this because this is the instruction. If it comes in, that means that character is the instruction. Now I had to figure out what I had to do with that instruction. So I'll yeah. So I'll name that variable as angle, because this we can consider this basically as a rotation. So and I have to keep it here because I want to know where we are right now and where we were before. Okay, and I want to know, okay, so I'm going to make the angle. So basically angle equals angle plus whatever value we are going to get from this. Okay. Okay. And now we have a problem. Say if we are in this position, so angle is already 4 or 3, and we get a C. We go out of their index. So we have to figure out how to solve that. So there's something called the modulus operator, which means if it goes over this amount, it'll, so basically the modulus means the remainder of a division. So if we divide this value by 4, what is the remainder. So which basically means we can go through this array over and over again. So I'm going to do this, and now I know what the angle is. But here I'm going to start with okay. So if I come here, that means I'm processing the instruction. Okay, so now I know what the angle. So when I'm processing the instruction, that means I'm going to overwrite whatever I have in the instruction variable. That means I have to add whatever I have to the output I'm going to send. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start a loop and go through the count, and that's where I have to consider about the angle, because that's when I'm actually printing stuff. So then I just have to, so now since I know what the angle is, I have to figure out, oops, what is the value for that angle. And then when you switch it to a new instruction, we have to make the count 0. So now if I run this, I can see that I'm getting this. And if we compare it with this, we can see that I'm missing the starting instruction, and then I'm missing the last instruction. Here it says N1, but I have N10. So we can fix the first issue by adding the starting instruction to the output. Okay, so now if we run this, you can see that we are getting the starting instruction. And regarding the last instruction, if we go through the code, we can see that we only add stuff to the returning string if we found another instruction after. So when you are pressing this, okay, we process this, we come here to A, then we write stuff related to C2, then we come here N, then we write stuff related to A3 into the returning string, then we come to N10, we pass that, and then we have no more instructions to write that stuff to the returning string. So there's one thing we can do, which is copy this loop and execute it again after the end. So we can get the correct output. Or else, since this is basically duplicating code, which we don't want to do, because the more complex your code gets, it becomes like more prone to errors. So we can do a simple hack like this. So basically, we can add an extra instruction to add the input we are getting. So it will have an extra C, or you can add whatever you want, but it has to be in this instruction set. And then it will process that, and we get the same output. So we'll basically come into this if block. So that's how we solve the first part of this program. So basically, we like when you go to a coding interview, this is what we expect. So you have to implement something as simple as possible, but at the same time extend, like it is easy to extend that as well. Okay, so the second part is do the opposite of what we did right now. Given a sequence, produce the shortest length instruction set that generates the sequence. Okay, so basically do the opposite, but like if you are given this, you can, like if you are given this, you can write it as C1, C1, A1, A1, A1. You get the idea. So we want to like optimize it a bit, like we want something like this from a string like this. So I'll define another function for it. So before I process the instruction, now I want to find the instructions. And again, I am getting the input as a string. And again, I'll do the usual. At the end, I want to return an output. I want to return a string. So I'll define this here. Okay. So now I'm going to duplicate this. So we need to find the instructions. Then I'm going to use the same thing because then we can figure out if there are errors. So, okay. Now, for some reason, my IDE isn't like escaping stuff, like these stuff automatically when I paste. So I have to do some manual escaping. So there should be 10 ends, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 at the first turn. So 11. So I had to type 11 more. 8, 9, 10, 11. So it escapes probably. Okay, nice. Okay. Now, so since we have to do the reverse of what we did right now, I'm gonna create a reverse dictionary so I can look up what sort of movement is responsible for each instruction. So, and one other thing is like, okay, I'll explain it further. So first thing, I'm going to name it rotations. So basically I want to reverse instructions. So to do that, I have to iterate through instructions. So I have to get both the key and value in instructions. So key and value in instructions. I want both key and value, so I'm going to use that. So now we have to put this in a separate dictionary, but we need to use the value as key and key as the value. And I want to do it the same thing with the cursor. So I'm going to name it as angles. What I want to do is for key value in what cursor, but I need the index as well, so I'm going to read through it. And now again I need it in the opposite way. So creating things like this will like make my code much simpler instead of like defining each and every instruction using code with if blocks. Okay, now since we have those, what I'm going to do is I have to figure out what is the difference between two instructions. So I like two instances of the cursor like this, so I can figure out what instruction caused it. But we can't start from the first character because there's no instruction to compare that with. So I had to start with the second. So for current in input, but I had to start from the second character. Okay. Now I have to figure out what rotation caused it. So what I'm going to do is also I need the previous cursor position to figure out what the rotation was. So I'm going to get this as the initial one, and then I'm going to change it inside the loop. Okay, so we can easily find what the rotation was by doing something like rotation equals, I'm going to minimize it so I have more code visible. I'm going to angles, the current position minus angles where it was before. Okay, now we have to make sure that it continues if it goes over this. So I'm adding a modulus 4. But now we have a problem. So when we have the instruction as -1, it can also go the other way around, and which complicates things for us. But if you like look at this, you can figure out that we can rewrite -1 as +3, because like it's a, like going forward thrice is the same as going back once. So I'm going to change this to 3, so it makes my life easy. Okay, now I have the rotation, and now I'm going to figure out what the instruction is. So instruction equals rotations, the rotation. Okay, and I have the instruction, so let's see whether I have figured it out properly. So I'm going to just add it to the output. Okay, it should, like, I should get 2 C characters and then 3 A characters, but I'm getting something else. So that means I have made some mistake. But like if we look at this closely, we can see that it is correct in a way, because we are starting here, then we do a C, and compared to the first one, this is an F, like the second instruction is an F. Okay, yeah, second instruction is an F, and the third instruction is a C, and the fourth instruction is an N, and the rest of stuff are A. So that means we are not incrementing, like changing this, though I told you guys in the beginning that we have to do it. So I'm going to do this. Previous cursor equals the current. So, and now if we run this, we get CC, 3 A's, and 10 N's. Okay, so now we are halfway through. We have figured out how to figure out what the instructions are. Now we have to like merge them to get a value like this. So what we can do is we can keep something like a variable like previous instruction. So we initially start with empty, and then something like the count. Oops. So whenever we go like figure out what the instruction is, we can check whether if it's the previous instruction. So previous instruction equals instruction. If so, we can just add 1 to the count. If it's not, that means we have found a new instruction. That means first we have to add it to the output. Sorry. So I'm going to add it to the output. Previous instruction, and then output plus the count. But I can't do it like that because the count is an integer and this is a string. So I'm going to cast it to a string. Okay. Now, after doing that, I have to make sure that I update the previous instruction with the current instruction, the new instruction we have got. and then make the count 1. So because like we already found one instance of the new instruction. Okay, let's see whether this fixes. Okay, oops, I forgot to remove this. Okay, so we get, okay, we are almost there, but there are some issues. The first is we have an extra 0 in the front, and then we don't have the last instruction. Okay, let's first like get rid of the extra 0. Why are we getting an extra 0? So like if we read through the code, we can figure out that initially we have the count as 0 and the previous instruction as empty. So initially when it reads this, it is a new instruction for him because this if check fails. So it's going to output whatever was in there before, but since previous instruction is empty, we can't see a character here, but it adds the 0. So there are two ways to solve this. One is to do a if check and see whether the count is 0, or else we can do check whether the previous instruction is not empty, and then do this. Okay, so now we fixed one problem. Now we have the last problem, like one last problem, which is we are not getting the last instruction, which is supposed to be n10. So like much like the previous issue, like problem here also, if we like go through the code, we can see that this block gets triggered only if there's a new instruction. So we can do one thing, we can do a small trick and add something to the array input, which will resolve this. But then there's a risk of like what if it end with this. So that means like our fix is like trick is not gonna work. So then we can do it the other way around. So basically do this, like add this stuff before returning the string. Previous instruction plus previous cursor. So now if we run this, oops, sorry, previous instruction plus str count. So now we have the output, but still this looks a bit what they call it, not that great, because like we have 2 here. So we can simplify this a bit by doing something like using formatted strings. So instead of saying it like this, we can do something like previous instruction, then we need the previous count, sorry, which will replace these two. We can do the same here. Oops, I just need this instead of this, and we have the correct output. So that is like how you would like solve a problem like this.